things up. Thought I'd throw together a quick video to kind of narrate my experience on the River of No Return endurance runs, the 108 kilometer version of the course, which if you do your math, 108 kilometers should be about 67.5 miles. Yeah, not that my GPS is the end-all be-all of accuracy, but the course was closer to 69 miles. Maybe the thing to do would be just to run another lap around the park, so that way you just call it a 70-mile course. So anyway, 6 months of training, a 2-week taper plus race week. I end up in Chalice, June 15th, 5 a.m. at the start line. And I'm ready to go at that point. You know, there's really nothing left to do except just go do the thing you've been training to do. Logistically, the thing I did different that I've actually never tried before, which ended up working out really well, was I started the race with just my handheld water bottle, lightweight jacket, my Patagonia Houdini, a headlamp obviously because it was dark for like 20 minutes, and I had like some chews and a goo, I think, and that was it. And I used the first 2 aid stations to get me to the third aid station, which was Bayhorse town site, at about 15-16 miles, or about the first 25 kilometers of the course. So I kind of figured it would be like a 25K warm-up and then like a 75 or 80K or whatever actual run.
Go, Jenny!
So we're standing there, the horn goes off, and the front of the pack and the middle of the pack, they're all just gone. Through the gate, around the U-shaped kind of chute that you come through on the way in and out, and those guys are gone. They're down the road, they're up the canyon and over the hill, and I never saw those guys again. Kind of hung in the back with a couple other dudes that were both named Brian, one of them from Meridian and one of them from Twin Falls. The Bryans, as I'll call them, a couple of nice guys. Kind of just floating in the back, running my own race, you know, and I know my pace. I know I'm not going to be anywhere near the front, so I figured I would just do what I had trained to do and just take it slow and steady. Came through the first 2 aid stations, down into Bayhorse, actually a little ahead of schedule. So there I am running down into Bayhorse, and I see my car, so I'm like, oh good, the crew is there. But they didn't have any of my stuff ready because they didn't think I was going to be there for another 25 minutes. So no big deal because I knew where everything was. So I grabbed my hydration vest, got my hydration bottles filled, grabbed my trekking poles, loaded up on calories, and then I was up the hill headed toward Ramshorn Mountain. So out of Bayhorse to the top of Ramshorn Mountain, gosh, I think it was a 3,000 foot climb. I don't even remember. I'd have to look at the map. Very relentless, very hot down in the lower elevations. Eventually I got to the point where the course split, and then I realized that several people that I was running with at that time were actually on the 108K course as well. So that was kind of cool. Made it into the Ramshorn water drop, about mile 20-ish or so. Made it in with a group of about 5 people. We all just filled up our water bottles and, you know, just chit-chatting and having a good old time. And from there, everybody broke, and it was up and over Ramshorn Mountain. The final climb up Ramshorn was not too steep, but definitely just kind of long and undulating. A couple of good snow drifts that we had to climb over, but thankfully the snow was still very firm, even though by this point it was, I think, 1 o'clock by the time I hit the top of Ramshorn Mountain. The cool thing about getting to the top of that peak was that meant that was the last big climb of the course. Now notice I said big and not less difficult, because from the top of Ramshorn Mountain, it's basically just a screaming descent down into Juliet Creek. Although the terrain wasn't too rough, it was mostly on a road or an ATV trail. So a pretty good, pretty fast descent coming into Juliet Creek. That was not quite the 50K mark, so still not quite halfway. I think that was mile 27 when I hit the aid station there. kind of got into my routine at the aid stations by that point, hand my water bottles off, get it filled with one with Tailwind, one with water, grab my cup, drink some Coke, eat whatever looked good. Quesadilla mostly, a lot of watermelon. And by that point, I was still feeling pretty good. I wasn't cramping yet. I'd taken a couple of salt tabs. It was starting to get hot, but it didn't feel unbearable, and it was already starting to get later in the day, so I knew the temperature wasn't going to climb for much longer. In fact, it was only going to get colder because I had another 2,700 foot climb ahead of me. So out of Juliet Creek, you come through the creek about, I think we had maybe 2 or 3 dozen creek crossings, most of them insignificant. 3 of them they'd strung ropes across, but they were never needed. I had my trekking poles, which was handy. The creeks actually felt good, but the water was definitely cold. Eventually you get to a point where you kind of get away from the creek and kind of up into the canyon a little bit as you reach the top of this bowl. And there's a little bit of mud there, a little bit of snow, nothing too terrible, just another unrelenting climb. So you top out on that ridge, and from there was just beautiful views of the White Cloud Mountains to the south, more of the Salmon River Mountains to the north. From there, the course kind of rambles along this ridge, and it was, another 4-wheel drive trail or old logging road or something. So it was fairly well graded, and the running was pretty good. But by that point, when you're closing in on 40 miles, how good are you really going to feel? I still felt, not 100%, but I was 80, 85. There was a little dip down and then a climb back up to get to Bay Horse Lake, which was about mile 39. Saw the crew there, got to Bay Horse Lake, had a chance to sit down and just kind of get off my feet for a minute. One critical mistake that I did make at that point in time was I did not take the time to do proper foot care. I should have taken my shoes off, I should have taken my socks off, I should have dried my feet, and I should have taped my toes, and I didn't because I'm an idiot. I thought my shoes were dry. They really weren't as dry as I thought they were. From Bay Horse Lake, it's another screaming downhill into Squaw Creek, which is at about mile 40, let's just call it mile 48. So it's a 7 to 8 mile downhill, and that shearing motion that you get, even when your feet are dry, that's what creates blisters, because you have that friction of your foot rubbing inside your shoe. And before I even got to the aid station, I think I was about maybe a mile out. I finally had to stop and change my socks. Luckily, I had some with me. I was able to get my feet dry. I was able to tape my toes up. And that got me into the aid station at Squaw Creek. Still feeling pretty good, even though I was, faced with, definitely going to get dark in, I think, another hour or two. Definitely going to get colder. I was definitely looking at, the real possibility of, DNFing if I couldn't make that last climb in a good amount of time. But that was only because I was bad at math. I actually still had about 3 hours to climb to the next aid station at Buster Lake. The cutoff there was midnight. I think I came through at like 10:30. Got down into Squaw Creek and realized that I hadn't seen anybody for hours. I don't know what happened to Brian from Meridian. I later found out through ultrasign-up that he DNF'd. I saw Brian from Twin Falls, and he said that he was dropping and he was just shot. Tried to convince him to go to Buster Lake with me. I was trying to tell him we had plenty of time, and he just decided to fight another day. Mad respect, tough decision, and definitely not one that I was willing to make at that point in time. Even if it took me the whole time, and if I got pulled from the course, I wasn't going to drop. Fueled back up in Squaw Creek, started the climb out, and then it was just another unrelenting, 2,300 foot climb along this creek, through this creek, up through this kind of like rocky area, which was kind of reminiscent of the foothills in some areas, only you're at, 8,500 feet, so breathing's a little harder. I came through this area called the Meadow, and now I know why they call it the Meadow. It was absolutely beautiful, just this big open sprawling meadow with, grass about a foot tall. Looks like something you'd see in a, magazine of, backpacker or something like that, only there would be like a moose in it. No moose, got a couple pictures, and by that point, that's when I realized that it was gonna be dark within a half an hour. The sun was setting, so I made sure I had my headlamp on. And from that point that you exit the meadow, you start one more climb up and over into Buster Lake. And that was the definite low point of the course for me. It was getting dark, my legs were getting tired. The darkness didn't really bother me, the tiredness of the legs didn't really bother me. But what did bother me was the slippery, suction cuppy mud that we had to deal with, along with standing water, like a marshy area that you couldn't tell where it was because it was dark and everything is just, dark on the ground, or it's white, so you know it's snow. The snow wasn't firm. It was very post-holy. It never really got too cold, but it was definitely a fight just to get through that mud. All the extra effort just to stay upright and not biff it was really starting to drain me. Started to get a little frustrated, so at one point I just stopped for a minute. I sat down on a log and I just said, I've got plenty of time. There's no point in trying to be a hero. The only thing I'm trying to do is finish this course before the cutoff. And by that point I was fairly confident that I could, so I just plugged along, got down to the road that leads down to Buster Lake, and there was actually a few people there, most of them volunteers, but a couple other runners. Got into Buster Lake, got my drop bag, jumped into some warm socks and shoes. I think I had another cup of miso soup, probably some Coke. I don't know what other junk I was eating, but I was feeling well. I wasn't feeling sick, and I still felt like I had some power in my legs, and so I bounced out of Buster Lake with probably an hour and a half to spare before the cutoff. So I was quite pleased with that, even though I was technically behind the pace that I had calculated for myself, which was okay because it was a long downhill from Buster Lake into Custer Motorway, which is the last aid station on the course. I think that section was about 10 miles, maybe 12. Ran into Custer Motorway, was greeted by some light up alien people. The crew was waiting there, which was awesome. It's always nice to see a friendly face, especially when it's at like midnight. I jumped out of my hydration vest and I grabbed my handheld water bottle to finish off the course. Stuffed my jacket in that, took one goo with me just so I had some kind of calories. By that point, just about everything hurt, but you're getting close to the end. And from there, it was about 5.5 miles to the finish. As you come down the road from Custer Motorway, it turns into Main Street in Chalice. There you go down to Highway 93, take a left, and then from that point, you're only 2 turns away from finishing the course. It was out across this field, and just when you think you're ready to stop running, you have to run that U-shaped chute to get back to the finish line. There was actually still some people there. I guess they were just hanging out, watching the stragglers coming in. Came through the chute, gave it all I had left, and by that point I was just elated to have finished. Everything just lined up, and I got lucky and I was able to finish a really tough course, and about the time that I projected, which doesn't always happen. Just super happy to be done, and 2.5 weeks out now, being on the mend and recovering and just ready to get back to walking around the mountains, up some peaks. So that's my recap of the River of No Return Endurance Run 108 kilometer course. If you guys are looking for a 100K or something like that, I would definitely give that race a go. The race directors were awesome. Big thanks to the volunteers. Shout out to all the runners. There were some very impressive finish times for the 108K. Stuff that I could never even come close to touching. But that's why they're the elite, and I'm definitely not an elite. Anyways, guys, thanks for following along. I appreciate it, and see you out there.